I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this is Genesis Does, where today we are looking at Ishido, The Way of Stones. Sounds like martial arts, right? Well, not quite. This game came out on a variety of platforms: Macintosh, MS-DOS, Atari Lynx, Game Boy, Commodore Amiga, Famicom Disk System, the FM Towns, which to me at least is one of those mythologized consoles that you only hear about, but I've never seen an FM Towns or an FM Towns Marty. I know they exist, but I've never even interacted with it. The PC 8801, the 9801, the Sharp X68000, again, another mythological console slash computer that I've heard about but never seen or used. So it came out on everything except Super Nintendo. Sega Genesis, yes. Super Nintendo, no. So in the words of Judge Mills Lane, I'll allow it. This game is a puzzle game with 72 stones and 96 squares. The goal is to lay all of your stones on the board. If you do that, you win. But winning isn't the only goal. You also want to score as many points as possible. And one of the greatest ways to score points in this game is to lay a stone next to 4 other stones at the same time. You get big points for that. That means you matched 2 colors and 2 symbols at once on all 4 sides. And matching is important, because you can't just lay a stone anywhere. You have to lay a stone next to its like or kind. It's Uno in that respect. You either have to play the same color or the same number. If you don't, the move is disallowed. You also don't have any choice over what tile you get next. Apparently you have a whole pouch full of tiles, but it's a blind draw. It's like Scrabble. You reach into the bag, you pull one out, and you play it. You don't get any choice. It's not like Tetris where you can rotate through different pieces that are in your queue and use the one you want. Well, at least modern versions of Tetris allow you to do that. Old school Tetris did not, but I digress. The point is, you have to play the hand you're dealt, literally. There's a huge upside and a huge downside to Ishido, The Way of Stones. The upside is it's very easy to understand, very easy to get into. You don't need an instruction manual or an in-depth fact to figure out what to do next. The downside is also the simplicity, which is compounded by the way that Accolade programmed this. There is no background music. There is no animation. It's just sound of tile slapped on board, rinse and repeat, which means this game couldn't possibly be any more plain. It just doesn't have any kind of window dressing that would help accentuate the experience. You can switch between 3 different tile sets in mid-game to make the tiles look different, but they still function the exact same way. It's just like switching fonts on a computer. They're still spelling out the same words even if the words are in a different style than they were. Maybe more tile sets would have helped. Maybe background music would have helped. Maybe some sort of leveling up, like if you complete a board, you advance to a larger board or a board with a distinctive pattern of some kind. There needs to be some sort of incentive to keep going. In this case, you really have to create your own. You need your own background music. You need your own goals. This is like speed running. You have to figure out what goal it is you want to achieve, set it for yourself, and then try to better that each time you go. That is the only way to make Ishido a satisfying experience. But that's not to say it's bad. That's just to say it's not exciting as such. Ironically, the history of this game is, in fact, more interesting than the game itself because it was part of a huge copyright trial called Sega versus Accolade, which is how I came to know of Ishido. Let me explain what happened here. In 1984, Sega Enterprises was purchased by its former CEO David Rosen along with a group of backers. Their names aren't that important. Let's move on. Sega became concerned with software and hardware piracy under their new ownership, and they had to figure out some way to keep pirated software from being usable on their products, like the Mark III, aka the Sega Master System that we know here. So, what did they do? They came up with a specific trademark lockout where the product licensed by Sega had to appear at the beginning of a video game. And if you used that without their permission, you were using Sega's trademark in violation of the Trademark Act. So you could be prosecuted for trademark infringement, even if you couldn't be prosecuted for copyright infringement, just by putting the lockout necessary to get onto a Sega system onto your game. This is where Accolade versus Sega came about. Sega used their monopoly on what could run on their consoles to leverage publishers into paying extraordinarily high prices to get their cartridges manufactured using the authentic Sega trademark. Accolade's Alan Miller said you pay between $10 and $15 per cartridge on top of manufacturing costs, so it always doubles the cost of the goods to the publisher. Accolade was not happy with this arrangement. It was cutting into their profits, so they reverse engineered a way to disable the security lockout with Sega's trademark and get a game running without having to display the under license from Sega at the beginning. And this made Ishido the Way of Stones work on Sega Genesis, but they were also using Sega's code and reverse engineering it to get around the trademark security system. So this, of course, resulted in a lawsuit filed by Sega in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. Accolade countersued and said that Sega was claiming false ownership of a game by forcing the developers to display the Sega trademark before the game would boot up. Accolade was unsuccessful in their counterclaim and unsuccessful in general when Judge Barbara A. Caulfield ruled in favor of Sega and enjoined Accolade from producing Sega Genesis games using the Sega message or their reverse engineering to get around the message. And a week later, the court even required them to recall all Sega Genesis games that they currently had in distribution. This was a crippling blow for Accolade at the time, but it was not the end of the fight because they appealed, and the Ninth Circuit overturned the district court's ruling and said that Accolade's decompilation of the Sega software was, in fact, fair use under copyright. Then they noted that the software was non-exploitative and that any trademark infringement was Sega's fault and not Accolade's by making the Sega name part of their false claim to be under license from Sega in their trademark system. So, in a sense, they created their own defeat by forcing developers to use their trademark to unlock software to run on the Genesis when they had no right to force people to do so, and inadvertently getting around that usage turned out to be fair use for the software developers. So, this was a huge victory for Accolade, right? Not quite, because Sega then appealed the appeal and got the injunction on Accolade software on Genesis to remain in place while they were getting the court to hear their appeal of this decision. So, they finally just settled out of court to get the whole thing over with. This ultimately resulted in Accolade becoming an official licensee of Sega, although any special dispensation that they may have received, like not having to pay $10 or $15 per cartridge as other people had, was not disclosed to the public, nor were the financial terms of the settlement, although both sides did agree to pay their own legal fees and not have them assessed to the other. From this point forward, you'd think it was fair game for anybody to develop any game for any console or platform, but in reality, that was not the case because the techniques to prevent pirated software from running on consoles changed over time. I would refer you to Modern Vintage Gamer, or MVG for short. He's got a wealth of videos discussing the ways that publishers have tried to control people from using their software illegally and how hardware manufacturers have tried to prevent people from using their consoles illegally, sometimes working in concert with each other, sometimes having their own goals entirely. But this has always been an arms race between the consumers who want to use their products any way they want and those that make either the platform they run on or the software itself deciding how you get to use it. It's a never-ending battle. Accolade is ultimately a minor player in a much greater war between all of these different parties. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you next week with a new episode of Genesis Does.